Okay. Welcome everyone to the second shir for Hilchas Pesach of this year, 5785. I guess kudos to everyone that could come out here a couple of days before Pesach, set aside some time to go through the halachas, or maybe that's why we're here, because it's a few days before Pesach and we want to get out. No, chas v'shalom. 1 second, let me just pin myself so that, okay, if everyone else joins. Okay, so today we're going to discuss basically this year's schedule, which is that Pesach falls out for Mitzvah Shabbos and Sunday, which makes things a little bit challenging for Erev Yom Tov, how to do things. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that, and then we'll talk about koshering. We'll go through some of those things, and if we have time, we'll go through some of the stuff of the Seder. So we might run out of time, but we'll do what we could. The main thing, I guess, is that we'll try to focus on is going to be the beginning, because it's different than your average year. So people, you need a refresher. It's something that we have to sort of go through again because we don't remember it, even though we just had it now, I guess, 4 years ago. But the time before that was it's we don't always remember. We fall into a pattern. Which is an interesting point that we'll come back to that in a second about falling into a pattern. So first of all, if anyone is a b'chor, so this year the fast is going to be on Thursday instead of Friday or Shabbos. We do it on a Thursday. The night before, which means Thursday night, all the regular halachas that usually apply to b'dikas chametz will apply just the same. So, for example, what time you start and when you do it, and that you're not supposed to, let's say, eat before or learn before or things like that. So all of that is going to apply just the same. We do make a bracha Thursday night, even though usually you only make a bracha the night of the 14th, or the night leading into the 14th. But over here, because the Chachamim said that when Yom Tov falls out in this sequence, then everyone does B'dikas Chametz Thursday night, which is the day before. So therefore, we do it with the bracha because that's the normal time that you're supposed to do it. If someone forgets to do it Thursday night, so then they should do the B'dikas Chametz the next day on Friday, and you do it with the bracha and a candle, basically similar to any other year that you would have forgot, except that this year, I guess you would do it throughout the whole day Friday instead of just till, usually only get a couple of hours the next morning, but here you get a lot more than that. On Shabbos itself, if someone forgot to do b'dikas chametz, so you don't use a candle because a goy should not carry a candle for you, and the only way to do the b'dikas chametz is really with the candle. So I believe you wouldn't be able to do it. You'd have to rely on, I guess, your bittul, and things like that to get away with it. But hopefully, Mirza Hashem, no one should forget to do that. It's, there should be enough reminders coming out. Now, on Friday, the best thing is to keep to the most similar schedule like every other year. So view it that your chametz was sold at a certain time. Technically, the Alter Rebbe really writes you have till chatzos. So I think most people will extend it a little bit later than your average year. But in general, always be looking at the calendar. This year, other years, and this year, Zmanim are always on target. But this year, you could burn it technically up to chatzos, which is a little bit later. But I mean, you can really burn it the whole day. That's the truth. And if you forget to burn it, then you could do it the whole day. But ideally, we always try to keep to as much the schedule as we can. So the latest should be chatzos is when you should do it. But you look at the calendar, whatever time it says burn the chametz by, that's when you should do it. Generally, we mentioned last time when people are traveling, so it could impact how and where they sell their chametz. This year, none of that matters. So if someone's going east to New York, it's not a problem. You could sell your chametz here also if that's easier for you, because either way, it gets sold way before the time that it's going to be usher anyways. It gets sold Friday night or before Shabbos, as opposed to usually it's sold too close to the time. So if you were in New York, it would be a problem because your chametz here in Arizona would not have been sold yet. But this year, none of that matters because it's being sold Friday right before Shabbos, which is anyways a half a day before it needs to be sold regardless. So that wouldn't be a problem for this year. Okay. Generally, the way the sale is going to work, you could look at each individual, sale, I guess, separately. But usually the way it works is that it's going to be sold right before Shabbos. So the whole Friday, technically, it still belongs to you. It's usually going to be sold right before Shabbos, and then we retain the rights for whatever we're going to need for 2 meals. Right? That's what the Alter Rebbe says, specifically 2 meals generally. So the 2 meals are going to belong to us even from the time that they're sold. So anything you're going to eat during those 2 meals was sort of set aside for you. Okay, so and that's really the way it's going to work. Now, okay, we'll come back to that soon, but for now, that's just the way it is. You could even, let's say, chametz kalim, again, very not recommended to use chametz kalim on Shabbos. the easiest, most recommended way of dealing with this is that you treat your Shabbos meal and everything as a regular Pesach meal. That's the easiest way to do it for a few reasons we'll mention. And when it comes to cleaning the kalim, you're not really allowed to clean the kalim on Shabbos. And if you have, if you don't have an Erev, so here they're in an Erev. I actually happen to live not in the Erev. So imagine I have even a disposable pan that has chametz stuck to it because I made some sort of cake or something. So what am I going to do? Throw it in the garbage? It's still going to belong to me because it's still going to be in my property. So it's not, and if it's not, even if it's not a disposable something and you want to try to clean it, but if it's something really stuck to it, it's a big problem with cleaning it on Shabbos because you're not cleaning it for now, you're cleaning it for after Shabbos, which you're really not supposed to be doing. So it gets very tricky. So the simplest thing is basically to keep everything as if it was regular Pesach meal as much as you can in terms of the cooking and everything like that. That would be the best way how to do it. Sorry, there's just this fruit fly or something buzzing around there. Now, let's say if someone forgets to sell on Shabbos, they forgot to sell the chametz. I'm sorry. So now, usually, if you already sold previous years at your Chabad rabbi, so it's possible that it may, once it maybe it would be included. Can never rely on that, obviously. So what you need to do is, you need to somehow, I forget like a little buzzer thing here. So it's feels like the New York pigeons, like the New York pigeons, they would always like come really, really buzz into your like very aggressive. So okay. So if you didn't sell it by the time Shabbos starts, so now you're stuck with a lot of chametz. I'm not talking about the chametz that you're going to be using for your meal. We're talking about in general, someone, God forbid, forgot to sell the chametz. So the best thing would be is if you can gift it to a non-Jew. Generally, we don't allow gifting on Shabbos. You're not really supposed to be giving gifts to a guy. It has to do with kinyanim and everything. It's a little challenging. But in this particular case, where you may be stuck with chametz, which is a much bigger issue, so we would allow that. So that's one idea. If you have, a friendly neighbor that you can do that with, and perhaps even give them a key, that would be the best way with a kinyan. That's if it's a lot of chametz. If it's not so much chametz, so then technically you could maybe make it hefker and have the guy take it. That might be a better way. Again, let's try not to fall into that situation. There's papers that should be on there in the bima. Just make sure to take care of it earlier. Sell your chametz. You won't have any issues. That's the easiest way how to do it. Usually on Erev Pesach, we don't say mizmor l'soida. That's because the soida was a carbon that they would be able to eat the whole day and at night, and it had chametz. So any time that you can't complete, let's say the carbon, so then you don't bring it at all. So Erev Yom Kippur and Erev Pesach were the two times that we don't say mizmor l'soida for this reason, because we can't bring that actual carbon because you don't have the full allotted time that you should have to eat it. You're not going to have this year. So this year on Friday, though, we do say mizmor l'soida because it's Friday. It's not Erev Yom Tif. Erev Yom Tif is Shabbos. So there's no problem with saying that. If there's a Sudas Mitzvah, a bris, or Pidyon Haben, so then call your local Orthodox rabbi about exactly how to do that, how to set that up, about eating and everything. You could eat all the things that people don't usually eat on Pesach, whatever chumras a person may have. I guess not kibros because we don't usually go next to the matzah anyways. But let's say other stuff like, and that's a different type of chumrah anyways. But let's say if someone doesn't eat maybe peeled stuff, processed stuff, I don't know, whatever it is. So on Friday, obviously, even after you burn the chametz, there's still no issue with doing that, even for those that don't eat chametz. The Alter Rebbe does kind of imply that you should only be keeping 2 meals. That's what he says. From after the sale, you should have just 2 meals. The implication being almost that you shouldn't really be eating chametz besides for that. So ideally, we try from as much as you can to try to shift away from chametz on Friday after that time. For sure, from Shabbos, anyways, most of your chametz is sold, besides for a little bit that you have left. But even for those that will, that they would not eat the chametz, but the extra stuff you could still do. So, if you want to eat whatever, if someone usually peels their stuff, then you don't have to worry about that or things like that. Okay, we spoke about the kalim over there. Disposable, we spoke about everything. Okay, we spoke about all that stuff. So essentially, really, only your chametz, only your challah should be really chametz once it comes to Shabbos. That's the easiest, most simple way of doing it, straightforward, and that would make the most sense. Now, okay, we spoke about burning. So burning, we said generally people would say to stick. Really, you have all Friday. People would say to stick to the regular time, and after that, it looks like he says till chatzos, so it's a little bit later. Half hour, 40 minutes later, depending on the calendar. So that you could do. But if you forgot, or if you missed it, or if you were rushing, or something happened, so again, it's really not recommended, because we spoke in the beginning, the first thing we mentioned was about muscle memory, about getting into the habit of things. And the way we get into habits is that we remember things from year to year. So everyone knows that you're going to stop eating chametz, let's just say 10:30 or so. That's a number I just made up. And then you're going to have to burn it about an hour later. So everyone knows those things because it's ingrained in our mind that this is the way it works year after year. And if we're very hesitant to throw that off by changing things up. So imagine someone comes Friday before Shabbos and they make a barbecue and they burn their chametz. It's not a good thing for our memories, especially if someone has kids at home. It's not going to be a good thing for them to see things. It gets a little confusing. So you try to do it as much as you can to the proper time that we normally do it. And again, this year, according to Al Tareb, you can go to Chatzos, so it's a little bit later. But beyond that, you should really try to do it before. You do not say the bittul that we usually do after burning. In other words, after we burn, we say two things. We say Yihiratzen, which is like more of a ruchnistic thing. That we will say. The Rebbe said it on Friday, even when it was really when Pesach was Motzei Shabbos. So that we do say. It has to do with when you're burning the chametz. It's about self work and avodas Hashem. So that we getting rid of the klippus. So that we do say on Friday. But the kol charmira, which means the bittul that we usually do, that would say that none of this is ours anymore, that you can't say. Because what you're saying in that second bittul is that no chametz that's around belongs to me anymore. What do you mean? You're about to have a Friday night meal and a Shabbos meal, at least with just challah, so you can't really say that. So you have to say that the next day on Shabbos. So on Shabbos is when you do the bittul after the meal, right before the last time that you're allowed to have chametz. That's when you go to the siddur and you look inside and you say the bittul. You have to know what you're saying, like we said last time. So you should look at the translation before so that you understand it's written in Aramaic. Aramaic is not really our common language anymore. It used to be a few thousand years ago. So you have to make sure you know what you're saying, because it has to do. It's not a spiritual endeavor. It's an actual something that depends on what you're feeling. And if you're saying that you're severing your ownership over something and you're making it kehefker v'afradara, so you have to actually know what you're saying, that you're making this into unowned and it's nothing to me. So you have to know what you're saying. So that's a good way how to do it, is to look at the translation before. Don't necessarily read it in English. You could, but then you read it in English. So if you wanted to read it in the Aramaic for some reason, so read the translation first in your eyes, in your mind, and then over there. You can't really, again, if you have an Erev, it makes it a little bit easier if you can, which would be that, let's say on Shabbos, if you have leftover stuff, chametz, and you want to throw it in the garbage before the time. So I don't know how it works, everywhere has different pickups. By me, I'm actually not on the Erev, but I do have a public bin outside. So there's a public bin that a bunch of people share. It's basically city owned. So if someone has something like that, and you could get your chametz into there before the time, that's great. But not everyone has that, or not everyone can access it like me. So then what you would have to do is you have to think about, you can't just put the chametz in your garbage in your garage. That's not really going to help you, because it's still yours. It's still in your jurisdiction. You may be able to do what we said was bittul, but it won't be the idea of sort of getting rid of it. So you do have to, in this situation, ideally, you should... Can you put it in somebody else's trash can? Well, if you have an Erev and you can go out anyways, and you could put it in a public bin, sure. If you share with, let's say, a non-Jew, then you could tell them before the time that I'm gonna, that from, let's say, Shabbos morning, whatever's in here is gonna be for your ownership or your jurisdiction. So you could do that if you tell them before. It would be the same as putting it in a public place. It's just that if you're a partner with, let's say, two people. Again, every, I guess, municipality might be different of exactly the setup with the sanitation. If it's publicly owned, then no one owns it. It's hefker. But if you own it, or if you and your neighbor own it, then you'd have to have some sort of deal where you're just telling him that it's going to be his. Yeah. Good question. What? So the recycling, right? The recycling is usually not a problem with chametz generally. I mean, what? I need to look up how to put that say for now. So first of all, they're collecting. When are they collecting? So right, yeah. If so, usually kalim, if there's no like real chametz there, it's probably not such a big deal of like blias and everything. You're not going to use it, but if you make it hefker, and even though it's, because we don't, the problem is like this: if it's hefker and it's in your rishus, we don't really like it. So someone says, "Oh, this Danish is going to be hefker, but it's sitting on my table," and that's not a really good hefker. It doesn't really work. So inside your recycling bin, I mean, they're going to collect it anyways. What would be ideal? What you could do is pour something over it, like a bleach or maybe some sort of cleaner or something, to make it like pugum, to make it like So that would be the best thing if you could do that. If you could take it out, I know, like by me, they're actually collecting tomorrow. So if I could get rid of most of my chametz tomorrow, even in those bins, and then whatever you have left, you just make sure that it's not real chametz. I mean, in the city garbages, I could dump everything. So until Shabbos, you can do that. So what are you going to have later on Shabbos itself? So even your recycling, let's say, I mean, we love recycling, and I'm not, God forbid, saying someone shouldn't recycle, but I'm just saying is that if you have something that's full of chametz, then maybe it should go into the regular garbage at least till Shabbos. Which, by the way, might be what recycling prefers, anyways. Whatever they, if it's contaminated, I think they don't really use it anyway. So it's probably better that it should go in the garbage, anyways. And then what do you have for Shabbos? You're not going to have any chametz, anyways. So yeah, you have to just think a little bit ahead, exactly. Okay, so the vacuum cleaner bag, I mean, we spoke about this a little bit last time. You just have to make sure to get rid of that before Shabbos, and the brooms, the Play-Doh, all the chametz stuff before Shabbos, those all have to be taken care of. And really Friday, we said really Friday earlier. On Shabbos itself, we said you will be mevatel it, so that you could do. Okay, we did that. We try to burn the lulav in the beer, we did that as well. If anyone has the Erev Chatzeris, where you share like a house or a space with someone else, and you have you put usually a matzah or something like that. So Shabbos is when you would replace it, or right before Shabbos rather, to be eaten on Shabbos, and then you replace it for this Shabbos. So that would be this coming Shabbos. Before the Zman, which means Shabbos in the morning, right? Or whatever, Shabbos as it gets closer to the time. So after a person ate, usually people try to brush their teeth. Maybe they'll use first the chametz one, and then after they finish with the chametz one, they'll use a regular one. This year it's a little bit more challenging. So you have a few options. You could use a dry toothbrush. That means that if you finished your challah and your mouth is full of whatever, you could use a dry toothbrush. Don't make it wet, and you just wipe off all of the whatever it gets, and then that can work. And then it may be better, or another option in general is to use, let's say, a toothpick, as long as you know that you won't for sure bleed, right? Some people, every time they go in, they bleed. So that's a problem. But for people that they don't always bleed, or sometimes yes, sometimes no. So you could use a toothpick, or if you have, you can't tear floss on Shabbos because it's, we spoke about machatech, remember we're cutting to size. But you could use maybe the picks, the ones that are little things, something like that to go through and get rid of it. That you're allowed to do on Shabbos, as long as you're not for sure going to bleed, that can work. For people that have braces, it's a little bit more challenging because usually you could clean or whatever. This year it's a little bit harder. So I saw some people say that maybe before they eat chametz, they should, like bread, basically challah, they should maybe wet the challah or something, make it a little bit more soft, and this way it won't get like stuck inside their teeth. So that's an option for people that have braces to be able to do that. When you have leftover challah, so after, again, we said in the beginning that when you sell all your stuff and it takes effect, as soon as Shabbos comes in, we exclude whatever you're going to eat on Shabbos. So when you finish your challah, that's not included in the sale to the non-Jew. So that challah is yours on Shabbos. And you can't now give it to the non-Jew either, because again, we don't really do that. You can't it can't be koine it sort of in that sense on Shabbos when it was excluded from the sale. So what we do with this generally is you crumple it up and you put it into the toilet. That's the best way to do it. First of all, try not to have extra. So if it's possible to be very not limited, but I'm saying to be very precise, I guess, in your amounts of how much you'll eat and how much so you won't have any leftovers. That's going to be the best. But it does happen that sometimes you have leftovers. So one option would be is to crumple it up and put it into the toilet, and that can work. The Alter Rebbe, I think, writes about throwing it into a river or a stream, which we don't have streams in Phoenix, Arizona. I mean, I guess you have some of the waterways here, but that's not going to work. But you flush in the toilet, and that can work. That's not a problem. Again, if you have a public garbage, then you don't have that issue. So you guys might be in a place where you have an Erev and you have a public garbage. So then if you carry in the Erev, or for this week if you want to, then that can work as well. I did hear that some people would take it when they're finished and put it into the place that was sold. So I just want to differentiate between, I believe, the two different things, maybe what the misunderstanding is. I think things that were originally sold. So let's say you go into your house on Pesach and you find Reisman's cookie, whatever, wrapped up in a plastic. And you say, oh, this is terrible, chametz on Pesach, fine. But it was sold because you sold all your chametz to the guy, including what you weren't aware of. So it's all sold. So that chametz, you could go and put it into, let's say, behind maybe hold it a little bit, not in a regular way if it's on Yom Tov for Shabbos, but you could go and put it behind the mechitza where it usually is, or in the locked room, because this is basically it's a guy's cookie, and that's his space. So you could put it there and you can have it after Yom Tov. It's not a problem. The difference is when it comes to the challah on Shabbos, that was not sold. That means that it's yours, right? Otherwise, how do you eat it? You can't claim to sell it and then you're eating it, and it doesn't make sense. So it's yours. You're actually going to eat it. Now, whatever's left over still belongs to you. You can't put it in a locked place. It doesn't help you. You don't sell a room. You sell the chametz in the room, right? It's not a real estate transaction. It's a food transaction. So if you now go and put your challah inside that locked place, it's not going to help anyone because that challah was never sold. It still belongs to you. So it's like you putting your own things in his space, which is a problem. So that's why you have to really, like we said before, flush it down the toilet. I did see somewhere else another option if you could maybe pour, I'm not sure how that would work on Shabbos though. I'm not sure if you could pour something like a bleach over it. I'm not yeah, maybe you could do that as well. Pour like bleach over it to make it unedible. But I think the toilet would be just the simplest, best way. You don't have to worry about batashkas. We spoke about also a couple, a few weeks ago, or by now it's a few months ago, that anything for a mitzvah, you don't have to worry about batashkas and you're getting rid of it, so that's not going to be a problem. What? So right. It's a good question, and it's not entirely the way it works anymore. It used to be the chametz was yours, so if you find it, you have to burn it right away. But if you sell all your chametz, including what doesn't belong, including what all the chametz in your house, we add in our shtar, we add kol makom shehu, any chametz in the house. So it's not really yours; it was all sold. Now, if you knew and you excluded it because you wanted to eat challah Friday night or Shabbos day, so that's excluded. But everything else is included. So really, you don't really have to burn the chametz these days anymore. So the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch writes it for people that didn't sell, they didn't have preservatives and things like we do. So what were they going to keep? Mashka, basically. But other than that, they didn't it wasn't as common for people that they would have what do you call pantries filled with chametz. It just didn't exist. They'd have bread that would go bad after 3-4 days. Or maybe their bread lasted long, but their bread lasted longer because it was a hard, But anyway, the point is that nowadays, if it was sold, if it was included in the sale, then you don't really have to burn it. And some actually say you really shouldn't burn it. First of all, on Yom Tov, it doesn't belong to you; it belongs to the non-Jew. So if you burn it, it's not yours to burn. So, okay, we'll jump a little bit, guys. This is a little bit out of order, but let's stick on the same topic. We'll come back to kashering soon. Okay, so we spoke a little bit before about the types of foods that you make and that you're not really allowed to clean a dish from chametz on Shabbos, and it's very, very, very challenging, even if it's in a disposable pan. If you have a place, like we said, you're in the Erev and you could throw out the disposable pan, so that is an option you could do if you really wanted to do that. You could do that as well. But ideally, like we said, the best thing would be is really not to just cook as if it was Pesach. It'll save you from everything. It'll save someone from using a chametz spoon by mistake and putting it in the wrong place or touching something with chametz hands. Just use everything if you could. Use everything as if it was Pesach. For any chametz, you're going to have, I guess, challah by that meal. So at least, you should maybe have also disposable, plastic stuff. So this way, again, it shouldn't have real chametz either, but at least that it shouldn't have, anything like that. The challah should be the minimal that you can. People are using like pitas or stuff like that are not crummy. So I guess everyone, depending on how that works. I believe you could use a matzah as your second lechem mishnah, and you could keep it in a bag and then it doesn't touch the challah. It is possible, but I think if you could just get smaller little challahs or make sure that it's finished, it's probably the better way how to do it. That would make the most sense. Okay, gefilte fish. If someone's going to have gefilte fish, just remember some gefilte fishes or many of them are chametz. So just keep track of what you're using. And if you are, then you have to make sure, like we said, to get rid of it. And if you are using somewhat chametz stuff, make sure all your chametz is in one place. If you want to have, you can't go a morning without your cake and coffee. Make sure that your is. Oh, 1 second. Sorry, something's happening over here. Just make sure we're still good. Oh yeah. So if you need to have your cake and coffee, so just make sure that your cake is, minimal, that you won't have, like we said before, a problem with having leftovers. That'll just get challenging. As much as you can do to that would be the best thing. If you're going to be, eat in a place that's easy to clean or easy to transition, I used to live when I was in Crown Heights for many years. I lived in a building on the 4th floor. So obviously we never stayed for Pesach, so that we had it easy. But in theory, if you would have stayed, it would have been pretty challenging on such a Shabbos. But over here, a lot of people live in a space with a little bit of outdoor area where you could kind of like have that, where you can go and clean it easier. If you are eating outside, you have to remember about spilling. So just remember, you shouldn't have water that can spill, in all those areas. But we did speak about, if you remember, we spoke about it then also many years ago. depending on what type of liquids are spilling, but just be aware of it that if you're outside, you do have to take care for that. The way it works, if a person, if you're doing, let's say, your meal all outside, right? You have a table outside that's covered over with something, and you're going to have a very minimal chametz, but you'll eat everything outside, plastic, and this way, you get rid of whatever chametz you have. You'll finish the challah, and then you'll just throw everything out in a separate thing, and you're good to go. So that's a very simple, smooth way how to do it. But many people will do half-half. So they'll have half a meal, let's say, in their house, which is a Pesach meal, and then they'll have the chametz, the challah, basically somewhere else. So you just have to be aware of the idea. We spoke about this in laws of Shabbos as well, about you have to balance two things. Number one, your kiddush has to be in the place where you're going to have your meal. That means your kiddush and your challah have to be in proximity. I'll explain how that will work in a second. So that would be number one. And then you also have to take into account the benching. If you're going to wash in one place and then make kiddush somewhere else, and where you're going to have your meal somewhere else, then where you're going to bench. So simply, if you have one location where you could do it all, easy to clean, and you want to have much chametz there, then that's the easiest way how to do it. The other option would be what we spoke about if you're, back then, the idea of like what's done over here, which is that, let's say the rabbi would make kiddush over here in the front, and then the kiddush is outside those windows. So as long as you're in one location, one building, and according to the Alter Rebbe, even if it includes the chutz or the courtyard, as long as you can see it, it's considered like it's in one space, and you can do that. So you can make kiddush here, and you can have your hamaitzi there, and then you can come back and do it. So let's say in my house, I have a little patio right off the dining room. So if I'm going to make kiddush in my dining room, and then I'll go out to the patio, let's say, to have challah, and I had this all in mind, then I can walk back. It's a few feet away, but I can go into another room and finish the rest of my meal, and I can bench there as well. So that can work wonderfully. If it's more complicated than that, then already call your local Orthodox rabbi, because what some people would do is they would maybe have, if you have to do this in different locations, so let's say they'll make kiddush in one place, maybe with hamaitzi, and then they'll go and they'll have the meal in another, and then before they finish their meal, they'll have you have to bench where you had your meal. So they'll have a little bit of a tiny bit of bread or something like that, so now they could bench in that location. So again, I guess, the more simple you could keep things, always the better it is, but not everyone always has the luxury of keeping it simple. So you just have to know some of these things to take into account and figure out how to maneuver in that situation. There was another option. I don't know if you remember back then, we said something about that you can make kiddush maybe this. I don't know if this works Friday night, but you can make kiddush really on shahakal, on mashke maybe. And then if you have shahakal in the beginning, then you can have your, I don't know if somehow it works out that maybe maybe you just won't realize, you won't remember what's happening anymore. But there's somehow that if you do kiddush on mashke, there's some sort of a maneuvering. I think that then you could for sure bench in the second location, and you don't have to, I don't know, something. There was something along those lines. But I don't think anyone is going to do that on this Shabbos. I shouldn't say that. There might be, but we're not going to. Okay. Anyways. The problem was, right. The problem was that if you're going to have that the problem was like this, that you want to also bench where you're having your challah. Otherwise, it's not a Suda Shabbos. The Suda Shabbos has to have the challah. So you want to bench where you had your Suda. And if you have, let's say, the challah, the Suda Shabbos is one place, and then you have the meal, and then you want to bench here, so you're benching where you had like einig, but not where you had the Suda Shabbos. So that was part of the juggling act that we're trying to work with. Okay. Okay, if you're washing from a place that's very far from where you are eating your challah. So if you remember, we spoke that it was about 22 ames, which is like 35 feet or something like that. So then we said one of the things you should do is maybe you should dry your hands when you finally get to your location, because the drying is part of the washing before bread, right? There's the actual washing, and drying your hands is part of it. That's why you shouldn't really use an ear dryer. You should use a napkin. Okay, we're getting a little bit off topic, but the point is that if it was a very far distance from where you're washing, which happens sometimes on Pesach, this type of situation where people are trying to balance everything. So it could be there's a very big distance. So dry your hands when you sit down by the table, and that can work. But I think I remember seeing somewhere that if it's all in one roof, then really that doesn't work. It doesn't matter, the 22 amas. Either way, the point is that that's one option that you can do. If it's very far away, just dry your hands when you're sitting down, and that can work. What people very often will do is they'll get rid of the whole tablecloth. So they'll eat a meal with chametz, let's say, and imagine they have an erev and they have a place where they can go and throw it out. So they'll just pick up the whole plastic tablecloth and throw it out. So just make sure that you don't have candles on there or things like that that are muktzah, because that would make it challenging to move the candles and lift up the tablecloth. So just make sure that you don't have that as an issue as well. Wherever your chametz is going to be, make sure it's safe from kids, and if it's outdoors, make sure it's safe from other types of creatures or things like that. If women already kasher their rings, or men, I guess men rings are usually smooth, but either way, try to be careful for chametz, and no chametz should get in there. That you shouldn't have any of those things. You could split your meal, which means that you could start your meal with chametz, and then when it comes to the zman, which is on Shabbos, whatever time it's going to be here in Phoenix, I don't remember offhand, but whatever time it's going to be, you could transition to a non-chametz, fully meal, and that's fine, and bench after without eating any more chametz. That you can do. Right. No. So right. So you could continue your meal. You could continue your meal after. Oops, sorry. And you could bench after as well, as far as I understand. In other words, it's similar to like when you have, let's say, when you wait between milk and meat. So let's say you're in the middle of a meal with meat, and the meal went on for 6 hours, but you only had the challenge. You stopped eating at 12 o'clock. So 6 o'clock, you could have milchiks. You don't have to go by when you bench. You can go by when you finish. So the same thing here. As long as you finish eating the chametz, even if it's part of the same meal, as far as I remember, that would not be an issue. And you could bench there later, and it wouldn't be a problem. Just a technical thing, I guess you could say, is that because I guess the Seder is going to be a little bit of a different time, a little bit later than usual, I guess, starting later. So just make sure if you have timers or clocks set up that it should take into account that you're going to be up a little bit later. It shouldn't turn off on you in the middle of the Seder. Okay. So we spoke about getting rid of the leftover chametz. We spoke about it that number one, it could either be broken up and flushed. If there's an eruv, you could put it into a hefker place, or you can gift it to a non-Jew. Gifting is a little bit more challenging. It depends how much you have. If it's a little bit, maybe, and even then you can't really give it to him, so you'd have to come in and get it. It's a little bit more of a challenge. If none of these can work for whatever reason it is, then what you can do is you could be mavatal it, right? Let's just say there's no guy, there's no toilet, I guess, you're camping or whatever. I'm not sure exactly how that would work. And there's no eruv, I guess. So in that case, you could basically be mavatal it, which means that you basically say that it's not yours, and then you have to cover it. And after Yom Tif, you would have to destroy it. That would be a classic case like he brought up before, because this was not sold before. So even though you're being mevatla and you're saying that it's not yours, but it's in your house and it sat there and no one was able to access it. So therefore, you should destroy it, right? The first opportunity that you would have in that situation. Okay, and then it's muktzah. So all the regular laws of muktzah would apply. If you have something on, you need a space, you can move it, whatever the stories would be with how that can all be. If someone does use a keli that has a little bit of chametz on it, meaning not one that you have to like really clean, but just like even let's say you're using plastic, but you don't have access to a public garbage bin. So if it has a little bit of chametz, you could wash it off and allow that to go down the drain, and that's fine. The problem we mentioned before was where there was like real chametz that was sort of caked into a pan or something like that. That was a challenge. But to just rinse it in the water and let the chametz go away, that you can do, and that would be fine. You have to sweep the area where you ate if you had chametz there before this man. Okay, you should. If you're going to wash your mouth on Shabbos, let's say before this month, so make sure you're doing it in a bathroom or somewhere that's not no food will come there on Pesach or anything like that. Okay, so this is a few more things. Okay, a few more things about this. So okay, this is not going to apply. Malacha on Erev Yom Tov, doesn't matter this year anyways because it's a Shabbos. We don't prepare on Shabbos. We don't prepare for after Shabbos. So in a person's personal home, because it's very stressful, it is, but we try not to do basically anything. So cleaning up you could, because cleaning up is just for your sanity. You do that all the time. It's not preparing necessarily for after. I did see somewhere where maybe if a non-Jew comes, they can prepare the house, meaning set the table and stuff like that. You shouldn't do it, but they can do it for you. That would be Amir Lenachri. For that they can do. But really no food preparation. They can't really do food preparation on Shabbos for after Shabbos. They could take things out of the freezer. So on Shabbos itself, they could take things out of the freezer and leave it on the table or something like that to sort of start defrosting. So that they could do. And I actually saw somewhere, and it makes a lot of sense the more I thought about it, that you could have them from Shkia, from Shabbos Shkia, which is I don't know what time was it this week, 6:40 or something, something like that, 6:40 something. So you can already ask them to start doing malacha from Shkia on Shabbos. So let's say before the Seder, you want them to heat stuff up. You could already tell them from Shkia, which is a little bit earlier. So it gives you about an extra half hour, which is good. I don't know if this would really be for like a home setting or more for like a Chabad house setting. The difference is that a Chabad house setting, because this is for a community and it's a tzarich mitzvah. So if you're Amir Lanachri, you're allowed to do. For your own personal thing, I guess you can maybe wait the extra half hour. But for people that are doing big public sidarim where you have a lot of people coming, so then you could tap into those things. They can set the table. They can't really do food prep, but they could take things out of the freezer. And from Shkia, it's very possible that they could already start to heat things up and stuff like that. Okay. Candle, something else. So, checking the lettuce that you're going to use for the Seder should really be done before Shabbos. You could maybe do it on Yom Tov itself. You just have to be careful for the act of what we call boirer, which means that you're going to be, let's say if you find a bug on it, so you'd have to rip off a much larger chunk. You can't, or wash it off. You can't like take off the area where the bug would be, because that's too precise and that's not really something you should be doing on even on Yom Tov itself. If you are soaking the lettuce, or if you did soak it before Shabbos, you have to make sure that it's not soaking in water, because anything that soaks for 24 hours is considered cooked, and we're not allowed to use cooked vegetables for maror. It has to be fresh. So if you could wash them before and check them, and then pat them dry, and then put them in the fridge. That you could do, but there shouldn't be any like liquid buildup there. That wouldn't be great, and you wouldn't, it shouldn't really be used for Shabbos, for maror. I'm sorry, in that case. Salt water you should also try to prepare before Shabbos, or you can order it from your local. I don't know if here they have it, but in New York they used to sell salt water for Pesach with a ridiculous price tag, which was a little silly. But some people, maybe for them it made sense. They were traveling somewhere and they just wanted to buy everything. So either way, the point is that you should really try to prepare that before Shabbos. You could do it on Yom Tov itself, maybe with a little bit of a shinoi. It's like pickling, it's salting, so it's a little challenging. It's but you can do it on, I guess, on Yom Tov also. Maybe make it a little bit less salty. If I'm not mistaken, that was the thing. But charesis you try to do before also, which anyways I believe everyone will. If you do cook the eggs before, which most people probably will, the hard-boiled eggs, so you have to make sure that it's still in the shell, because otherwise an egg that was left overnight, we don't really use it. It's a sakana. Okay. The women, they should make sure to remember to say Baruch Hamad Mekedesh HaKodesh before they start doing anything, because they're going to transition to doing like malacha. We're going to daven Ma'ariv first, so we say it in davening, but they have to make sure that they say it before they actually start doing any malacha, that they should make sure to say Baruch Hamad Mekedesh HaKodesh. Shachiyanu, they should have in mind all the rest of the mitzvahs when they make Shachiyanu. Okay, the Zroya, this is, I guess, we're jumping a little bit back and forth. Okay, so you know what, let us, okay, let's finish this, because this is really, I guess, about really preparations from before. So let's finish this little section, and then we'll see what we go to next. The Zroya, we generally use the neck of a chicken. We roast it, and it shouldn't be eaten. It shouldn't be eaten. In fact, the Frierdiker Rebbe would take off all the flesh of it, so all you had was basically bones. So if you go to your local Chabad Seder and they serve you this measly little chicken neck without any ripping off all the meat, it's not because they're being skimpy on you. It might be, but the reason is because we really want to make sure that no one will come to eat it. And as the Frierdiker Rebbe used to do, so that's what we do as well. The egg should be hard boiled. Some people, again, you have to leave the shell on, especially if you're doing it from before. Some people will give it a little like smash to make it a little bit more solid. Some people, I believe the Rebbe did not do that. So other people will leave it whole, and then it could get a little challenging to keep it balanced, but you figure it out. The way maror is, we use both. We use greens and chrein. So greens would be lettuce basically, and chrein would be horseradish. If you can't use horseradish for whatever reason, then you can use greens. In fact, the original lettuce, the original maror was really chasa, was really lettuce, and that's because the lettuce that we get is good. People like it, but I believe lettuce gets very bitter if you leave it on for longer, hard and bitter. And it exactly mirrors what the Jews experienced. And in the beginning, it was easy. They were, things were kind of in Egypt, things were nice for them. And then it progressively got harder and harder. and more challenging and more persecution, etc. So the lettuce actually mirrors that. But in many countries they didn't have lettuce, so they transitioned to grain, horseradish. It's more of a root vegetable, so in cold climates or places like that, it was obviously more abundant. And most of us have kept that as much as we can. We keep it here as well. We have both of them. But if you don't have grain, or if a person can't eat it, then you could have just lettuce. But the Rebbe would do is he would take, I believe, four heaping spoons, and make it into like an egg shape, and then wrap the leaf around it. So it was a nice amount. Okay. So we said before, if you do find a bug in the lettuce, then you shouldn't just take a tiny bit off. You should really rip off like a larger chunk. Okay, how to do it, which one to pull. So that's already beyond the scope of this. Okay, whatever. That's already something else. If you don't have onions or potatoes for karpas, you could technically use celery for those that use celery, or other vegetables. Basically, any vegetable really could use, as long as it's not the same one that you're using for the maror. Okay, should we go to that's a general thing. Should we go to some koshering stuff? Yeah? Okay. So we'll go through some of the different I guess like titles, I guess you could say, or things, and then we'll go to appliances. So we'll go through different procedures, and then we'll talk about appliances after. So procedures would be number one, Hagala, which is the most common one, which is basically, so let's go back a second. The rule by koshering is any way that the keli absorbed, that's the way it's going to spit out. That's what the Torah says, that anything that was by the war that the Yidden had with Midian when they got their kalim. So the Torah says that whatever was absorbed through fire should expel through fire, whatever through water. So it's called kabele kachpalte. The way it absorbs is the way it spits out. It's not always completely identical. For example, something could absorb at, let's say, 113 Fahrenheit, which is what we call Yatsi Ledis by a lower threshold, but it will only expel to kosher it only at 212, at 212, 210, 212. What's the boiling point? I forget. 212. 212. So 212, so it only expels at fully 212. So on one hand, it absorbs earlier, and it will expel progressively when you use it at a lower temperature. So you have to kosher it, but it only will expel for koshering at 212. So you have that balance. So that's what. But generally, the way something absorbed is the way it will give off. So if you have a spit, is that the word where where it absorbs? Let's say the actual metal would absorb directly from something. I'll give you an example about this where it comes across my ovens. I'll talk about this soon. But the point is that then you may have to use what's called libun, which means real fire to expel it, because there's no liquid medium that was in the way. But usually when things absorb through cooking, which means that there's a liquid medium, so it will expel through the liquid medium as well. Okay, so Hagala, the general way it would work is that you could only do that before Pesach and the Zman Isser. Okay, let's leave that aside. Okay, metal, right? Metal, wood, bone, and solid stoneware. Solid stoneware means not ones that are ground or reconstructed, like quartz, for example. Quartz would be a little bit more problematic. It would probably depend on the ratio or stuff like that. But most things that are stoneware, that are natural stone, metal, wood, or bone, these things could be koshered with Hagala. We'll talk about the processes later. Wood could, but not when it's painted. The paint would be something that would impede, so the paint would be a problem. Plastic seems to be that it could be kosher, so if it needs to be. Earthenware and glass, and this would include Pyrex and crystal and all that stuff, or anything that's coated with them, so that we don't kosher that. There are some that would, maybe Sfardim do, so you have to know your own community, but Ashkenazim we do not we don't kosher that. Knives or other types of kalim where you have, let's say, a thing made up of parts. So a knife can be, let's say, one solid piece, like your average, I guess, dinner knife. And then you could have ones that are, that are made up of two pieces, the handle and the blade itself. So if it has glue or small screws, it's very difficult to kosher. It's possible, meaning through Hagala for sure. Maybe you could do libun, like burn that area if it's screws and it's all metal. It's usually not all metal though, because that's otherwise it would get all hot. So maybe it would have something else like a rubber. So it gets very challenging. Ideally, today's day and age, we generally would try to just use everything new as much as we can to get extra, a new knife, a new this, a new that. That would be ideal. But technically, most kalim almost all kalim generally could be kosher. But if it has a glue or small screws or stuff like that, that's going to be, a little bit more challenging. Things with very small holes like sieves or stuff like that, or things that have very small pipes. So that would be also, they can't really be cleaned, and therefore, at least in between each one, and therefore we really would not like to kosher that as much as we can. Things that absorb chametz directly, we mentioned. An example would be like a Dutch oven or something like that, where you put the chametz in the actual keli without any liquid medium. We mentioned this already. So that would have to do libun, which means burning it out till it gets red hot. Pots, we said, would use agala. Frying pans, again, ideally we shouldn't really be koshering them, but if someone needed to kosher a frying pan, it's very possible for Pesach that you could, because it absorbed kosher. It didn't absorb something that was usser, as opposed to a pot that became treif, from milk and meat or something like that. So again, we really would stay away from it. Teflon, we'll keep that aside because these aren't things that we should really be, but if someone does need to, then reach out to your local Orthodox rabbi to give you the spiel of how that can be done. Something that needs hagala, which is the boiling water. If you wanted to use libun, which would mean a fire till it's heated up, there's two thresholds. We'll talk about that soon, but you could interchange them one for the other. Hagala, you could do libun kal instead, which is a lower level of the heat. If you wanted to do that, you can do that as well. But if something needs libun kal, I don't know if you could do hagala. I think it's just the other way around, I think. What would be what we call libun gomer or libun chomer? And what's libun gomer? That's the extreme, the best, or the top tier of koshering, which is basically when something would become red hot, boiling hot. There's a wide range of temperatures that would be. I think the average temperature we aim for now would be 9 to 950 degrees Fahrenheit. Some people would go a little bit less, like 650. I saw someone say, but I don't know that that's average. Most people would say 9 or 950. It used to be 9. Now they make the metal a little bit different. So either 9 or 950. So, okay. And libun kal, which is the lower level of torching it. So that would be two levels. Either if you touch the other side and it's 113, which is not very high, that means or 110 actually, which means that it would just it would singe your hand if you would touch it, or at least the softer skin over there. So that can work. Or some would say that there's another level also, that if it would burn hay if you would touch it on the other side. So if you burn the hay on the other side, that's a much higher temperature. I think they put it at 400 and something. So depending on what type of keli it was, again, most of us we're not trying not to kosher keli for Pesach in these types of stuff. But one would be, I think, if there was chametz be'ein, meaning let's say you have a knife that you can't clean, so you have to do libun kal there instead. So there you want it to reach 450. But if let's say you're just, instead of doing hagala for whatever reason it is, you're choosing to do libun, so then you could do the lower temperature, the lower threshold, if it's spotlessly clean. So let's say you have, for example, a pot that you don't want to boil over and spill water everywhere for some reason, which you should really, but let's say you don't want to, so you could technically turn it over on a fire and let it sort of burn itself out, and that can work as well. Because that would be the lower threshold of only needing to hit about 110 or something. Then we have another one which is very common for Pesach, which is called iroi and even maluban. Iroi means to pour, and even maluban means a stone that gets hot. Maluban means like fired up. And with the way this would work basically is that generally when you pour, let's say you boil up in your kettle. So in your kettle, the water that's boiling is what we call the kli rishon. That's the OG, as they say, right? It's the keli that was on the fire. The walls are hot. The water is hot. It's wonderful. But as soon as you pour it, it starts the process of cooling off, and therefore it gets lowered 1 degree. So if you need to use something absorbed chametz, because we said before, the way it comes in is the way it goes out. So if something absorbed from being on a fire, that means it absorbed from a first place, or first, whatever you want to call it, first degree keli. But when you pour the water over it, you're only koshering it from a first degree once removed. So what we do is we pour it, basically the boiling water, over a stone that was put on the fire, boiling up till it got really hot, so for a good amount of time. And then when you pour the boiling water over it, that stone will act as the fire, and it will refresh the water and make it into as if it's on the fire itself. So this is what we call iroi and even malubin, and we'll talk about this of where it comes into play. But the process of this would be, let's talk about this soon. So, okay, this would be generally 24. I'm just trying to see where, I don't know. Okay, generally 24 hours is your friend. That means that you always want to wait 24 hours before you kosher anything, because any taste that's absorbed inside goes putrid after 24 hours. That's the understanding in halacha. What that means, like in science, I don't know, but that's what it is. 24 hours, the taste inside goes putrid. So you clean out anything that needs to be kosher is clean, and then it sits for 24 hours. And at the end of 24 hours, whatever was outside is clean, and whatever was inside became putrid. And now we could extract it, and it would be it would make it kosher again. Now, let's say you have to make sure, again, I don't know how common this is, but you have to make sure the water is boiling like a nice rolling boil. So if you're going to put stuff inside of it or something like that, and if it lowers its boiling, you have to refire it. Make sure it's boiling again. You have to make sure that it's going to always be to that degree. You could do halves. Let's say you have a big pot. You could do half of it, kosher it, and it only fits in halfway, and then you turn it over and you do the other half. You should just, try to be precise as much as you can. You really shouldn't double over either, because if you double over, you stand at the risk of it reabsorbing. So you do 50, you can do half at a time, turn it one side, turn it the other side, but try to do it as close to exact as you can. We usually will try to work our way from the bottom up. So we'll talk about the details when it gets to, let's say, a sink. But for example, in a sink, if you're going to do the process of pouring with a stone, you start from the bottom and then you work your way up. Because if you start from the top up, then it drips down. And by the time you get to the bottom, there's already colder water there and it cools it off and whatever. So you start from the bottom and you work your way up. But we'll talk, that's in general. We'll talk about the sink soon when we get there a little bit more. Okay, let's leave all that for now. Let's talk about appliances, right? Any questions about that? That was a very brief overview. Yeah, everyone's good? Okay. So the sink. So depend on what your sink is made of. My house, when I got my house, it's for some reason it's the whole sink and counters are metal, one side, completely metal. So almost like what do you call it? Like like a restaurant style, or whatever you call it, like a industrial. But for koshering, that could be good. But imagine you have a porcelain or a ceramic sink, so those really can't be koshered. So what you do with those is you would clean them very well from any substance, and then you just put an insert inside. In bigger communities, they sell them. I don't know if they have them here, but if they don't, you can always get a Tupperware tub or something and just cut out a hole in the inside. That's what I did, and that works. So that's the easy way how to do it. And even then, you should make sure nothing's touching the sink or anything like that. It should be elevated a little bit. Okay. Enamel also is a little bit better, but it's also complicated. So for enamel, I've seen somewhere that you can do what's called what we said before, pouring the boiling water over the hot stone. If you do that 3 times, maybe that can work. But either way, people with that would end up using an insert also. So they end up using an insert as well. Metal sinks, technically, you don't need an insert. For some reason, I use one. I'm not sure, why. I guess that's the way I don't know people do. But in theory, you really don't need it. You clean the whole thing well. Scrape everywhere, as much as you can. And then you pour something. One second, why is it not? You pour a chemical like something that would ruin whatever food may be in the drain, because sometimes the food that's in the drain sticks there, and that could be a problem. So you pour something down to make that what's called pagum, and then you would end up doing that stone with the pouring over it, starting from the bottom and working your way up until you get to the top. Obviously, we said before the sink has to be totally clean and not used with hot for 24 hours. So if you're going to do it, let's say tomorrow night, maybe it's a little bit later in the game now, I don't know. But if you're going to do it tomorrow night, then you stop using it tonight. You could use it in theory to get your negavasser or something like that, or wash negavasser in the morning, as long as it's cold. It's usually recommended to kind of stay away from them, because by mistake you take your warm coffee and you pour it down because you're not used to it. So it's better to try to not use it if you can. But in theory, you could use it for cold. For these types of things you could do. And then after 24 hours, that's when you would do that process of koshering it. Generally, it's going to take, depending on what type of hot water you're using, but you'll get, let's say, one of those regular pouring ones, you'll get, depending on the size of your sink, but each pitcher should last you one sink, maybe a little bit more, but really about one. Refill it, turn it on again, put your oven, your stone back on the fire, and then you come back and you do the other one. And then, so it takes a few minutes. Hopefully you have a good hot water urn, so it doesn't take that long. But that's about how it should handle, how long it should take. The handles, you should clean very well. We pour boiling water over it. The faucet, you should run the hot water The faucet itself, you should run the hot water, and then while it's running the hot water on the inside, you pour the boiling water over the outside of it as well. If you could unscrew the thing over there and you just take out that filter and you replace it, that would be wonderful. Because as we said before, you can't really replace that. You can't really kosher that. Not everyone could do that. Some people will also then cover the whole thing. They get like these little socks they sell. They look like socks, and they you just kind of slip it on, and they have a cover. This way, if there's any little residual pieces over there somewhere, that it won't fall out or anything like that. So that's an option that people like to do as well. Okay, that's the sink. Oven. If anyone has any questions, pipe in at any time. So ovens. The easiest oven is obviously the self-cleaning one. Self-cleaning means the legit self-cleaning, which would be nowadays they're a little bit more challenging to find because a lot of them are, eco-friendly or they're energy savers or stuff like that. So they minimize the the usage of what it can do. But it used to be that they would get up to easily roughly 950 degrees, most of them. So that's fine. You self-clean it. They range usually, I think, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. I think anything at 3 and up is for sure fine. Possibly even 2 hours was probably fine as well. But from what I've seen, 3 hours for sure is fine. So set yourself up, when you have time, do it when you're home with all the safety precautions, obviously. But you put on a self-clean, leave the grates inside. That's the easiest way how to do it. And if you have grates on top, so they may get a little discolored. So you have to, know yourself and the people in the kitchen if they're going to be bothered by that too much. But you take that and you put it inside the oven when you do the self-clean. And if it's cast iron, it may get discolored. They sell paints, you can repaint it. I remember we once went years ago for Airbnb to someone with a bunch of relatives. We met somewhere in the middle of no man's land in the middle of the country. And we koshered it, and they all got a little discolored. So we ordered the paint, and the paint came from Amazon the next day. And you repaint those things, and it's back to normal. So you do have, if it does happen, you could do that. But that's the easiest way because the Alter Rebbe does say that grates, that pots that go on, they should have libun gomer. On one end, it gets burnt up every time something falls there. It will get burnt up. But you could have food that fell in it that was still on the fire and boiling and it absorbed. So the Alter Rebbe does want libun on that. So you put it inside the oven, and you're good to go. That's the easiest way how to do it. The parts of the oven that you on the top of the oven, let's say, if it's metal, then you could just do, like we said, pour the boiling water over it and you kosher it. If it's not metal, it's enamel or something like that. So there's not much you can do. So you cover it basically. If you have underneath the grates, you have those little collectors, spill collectors, it's called, I think. So you put those also inside. If you could, they probably only need a libun kal, so you don't have to actually mamish have them in the oven, but it might be the easiest way how to do it. We'll get to regular ovens in a second. The knobs themselves, you clean them really well. Some people will replace them. I don't know if that's necessary, but if you could, I guess, why not? You clean them really well. You touch them, your hands are full of chametz all the time when you're in the middle of cooking stuff. So you clean those really well, cover them if you could. That would be, obviously safely, and make sure, that can work as well. Okay, electric burners are fairly simple because the electric burner itself usually gets red hot. So you turn on each one, and then that's it. And then again, everything else, depending on what the story is. If it's enamel, you do what we said. If it's metal, then you could do what we said as well. Okay, let's talk about okay, the exhaust on top of the ovens. If you could just take down those little filters and replace them, you could buy another one. So that's the best way how to do it because they can absorb from the steam and everything schmutz over there, and then it spills it back out. So either that or cover it with silver foil and don't use your exhaust over Yom Tif. So, but if you could replace it, that might be the best thing how to do. Now, even the self-cleaning ovens, the glass part, we're a little weary about the koshering, like we mentioned before. So even after you self-clean, what people will try to do is cover over with heavy-duty sort of silver foil that glass door, so you won't be able to see in. They sell special oven silver foil. It's like a tape. Sorry, it's like a silver foil tape. So you could use that. It works very well, and then it could keep it in place. So that's something else. Okay, regular oven. Okay, a regular oven would mean one that is not self-clean. So it's more challenging. And there's two, I guess you could say, schools of thought. So one school of thought would be that it's very, very hard to kosher. It's basically, you have to do libun gomer, and it's very hard for anyone to do that. So basically, clean the whole thing out well, spray with the oven spray, and then you put in an insert or you double cover everything as if it was a non-kosher oven. That's sort of one school of thought when it comes to the self-cleaning ovens, because I guess it's also hard to it's hard to do a real libun, which means using a blowtorch and going over it is very difficult. It can get warped. I knew this would happen. My fly. At least it won't buzz on me anymore. That's like it's the wrong Yom Tif. It's a Purim story, no? That Haman told Achashverosh that if a fly falls into that. Okay, but anyways, so what were we just saying about the so one school of thought is that it's really challenging to kosher it evenly. It can get warped. You can peel away layers. If it's red hot, it means that you stripped away the protective edge, and it's not good. So basically, they'll say, you know what, cover it, cover everything you put in, clean it really well, and basically treat it as if it's almost like non-kosher, like when you get your double covered earline, dinner, that style. Then there are others that would say, you know what, it could be kosher, clean it really well, leave it for 24 hours, use a an oven cleaner, unscrew everything that could be unscrewed and clean underneath. And there's always like little things. If there is a protector, which means a piece blocking the flame, so depending on where your flame is, some of the flames are inside the oven. Excuse me, some of them are under like a plate or something. So if you can unscrew that plate so the fire is exposed, that's great. And they would say clean it super well, leave it for 24 hours, turn it on the highest, broil, whatever it is, for an hour or so, and then Shalom Al Yisrael, you're good to go. So you could rely on that if you need, that's fine. The only thing I would say in that case is basically wrap your grates with silver foil, make holes in it so the ear, circulates, and make sure the pans don't touch the walls of anything like that. And then that could work. So those are your two options. Either you want to always use it. In my days when I was growing up, they used to sell oven inserts. So this is like a metal box that you would put inside your oven, and that's what you would use. So if that's an option, that's great. I don't think they make them anymore. That was like an exclusive, Haredi type of thing. So then either you can go either way. Either you can, double wrap everything or whatever, or you could rely on those that say that as long as you clean it really well with oven spray and got underneath everywhere and turn it on the highest broil, and then cover the grates with silver foil, and you're good to go. So that's an option as well. Continuously cleaning is not a very good, it's not really self-clean. Continuously cleaning is some of them use water or moisture, stuff like that. Not a very high temperature, and that's not going to count as libun, so that's not really going to help you much at all. And like it said, it needs to be libun gomer from non-kosher for Pesach and all that stuff. Okay, that's it for the ovens, unless anyone else has any questions on that. Fridges and freezers, you clean them really well, make sure all the ice melts. And then all the cracks and crevices. Many people will cover it anyways. Make sure that you are not blocking any vents. So I think it was last year or one of the years that I did it. Even though I know this because I always talk about this, but for some reason I must have put a bag there and I didn't realize that it was on the bottom, it was covering two of the vents. And we had, some of the food was spoiled. It was before Pesach until I realized, I think we left for Shabbos maybe when we came back, it just didn't feel cold. And then I realized I was blocking the thing. So you have to make sure when you cover everything over, they sell, first of all, perforated ones. So those are, I think they're called liners, actually. They're made to line maybe cabinets, like a little, have a little rubbery foam feel to it. Or whatever you're going to use, just make sure that you're not blocking the circulation and that the fridge is ventilating well. Otherwise, it's not going to be good for your food. And why do we cover it? Because anywhere where we put Pesach food on Pesach, that there was chametz there before, we like to cover. In theory, it's all cold, nothing absorbed, and you clean it well, and you put it, the best way to do it is to take off everything and bring it to your bathtub, and then it gets, it's the best way to clean all the shelvings and everything like that. But again, anywhere where food goes, we try to take extra precaution, especially if food was there. So people like to clean it and then cover it anyways, even though it was cold. Drawers, closets, meaning places where, let's say, cutlery is or stuff like that, or dry goods. So you clean it all well, you vacuum it. Obviously, you don't have to kosher it, but again, people will try to cover it if they can with some sort of cabinet lining or what do they call them? Forget the names for all these things. Whatever, like different sticky coverings and whatever they're called. Counters and tables. So table is less of an issue because the tables, unless it's a table that that you mamish, like some people, they're bakers, they like to do sourdough or stuff like that. So if they take the sourdough and they put it on the table itself, so then you have an issue. Most people will generally be eating, with tablecloths or with plates and stuff like that, and you don't bring boiling hot water. It's usually on a plate. It's not from the pot itself. So tables are pretty good, especially if they were covered all year. So you cover it now, you don't have to kosher it. Many people would double covering is the best one. And again, you don't technically, I don't know that you need to. The reason why people double cover is because let's say, you're making a pizza and the pizza falls onto the table because it's a milchika table. So the food that was boiling hot fell directly on the table. So you don't have to kosher it, but double cover it. So people will clean the whole thing well. And then nowadays they have like fitted tablecloths. So those are great. Or if you want to use contact paper, that's what it was. Ah, thank you. So you could use contact paper and then you put something on top of it and that can work as well. Again, it's an extra layer of protection. That's that's a good thing to do. The counters themselves, so that would be pretty similar depending on where the counter is, but it's usually going to be pretty similar to the sink. So you're going to pour over it with boiling water and use Evan Malubin. And the reason is because you put stuff on there that are boiling hot often, and sometimes it spills, and if it touches the boiling pot, then it's under this. So ideally, and you could put your pizza on it again, like we said before. So these are places that have constant things. So we usually will pour everything over it. And then depends on the material if you have to also then cover it also. So if it's made from, like we said, different types of enamel or stuff like that, it should be covered also. If it's stone or metal, technically it doesn't have to, but I feel like most people would try to cover it anyways in case they miss the spot or whatever. So that's already more of a, I guess you could say, of a preference. Dishwashers are very challenging to kosher in general. Technically, if it's all metal and you don't use it for 24 hours and somehow you're able to jack up the heating element, some of them let's say the water will be 120, 110, let's say 120. So if you can go to the back somehow and manipulate your boiler and that to spit out 220, which people can do, so then that can work. But you might break something. Some people would say to put in an Evan Malubin. I don't even know how you would do that. How would you get a boiling stone in there I don't even know how a person would do that if it's metal. So it doesn't seem like it's something that should really be koshered, unless someone's a real professional, like an industrial type where the whole thing is metal and everything, they know what they're doing. They could unscrew certain gaskets and replace them or whatever. So then maybe, but for your average person, it seems like dishwashers should be avoided. High chairs should be obviously cleaned very well. People like to get another table for it. If you need to, you could do Ira if you don't have that and cover it. The kid will usually rip it off anyway, so try to get one that they don't rip off. All that stuff. But anything with kids is going to need a lot of attention. I just did the cars today, so I took their car seat, and I thought it was clean, and I put it down, and when I put it down, it was a little bit hard, and it shook a little bit, and sure enough, a few things fell out of it. So you always got to make sure that the kids it's all over. It's in every part of it. So you just got to make sure that you're doing a good job with all of that. Okay, if people have fillings or temporary fillings or braces or fake teeth or stuff like that, they would usually try not to have chametz for, I believe, 24 hours before the zman, and this way they wash it with as hot water as they can handle before. This year, that's like we said before, can't really do that because you have to have challah for the Sauda. So then, as we said before, you should maybe wet it before so it's much softer, not absorbent, and this way you can do that as well. Generally, when you buy new kalim, you don't have to be concerned that they were used before, unless you're buying used from Amazon. But if you're buying something that's being sold as new, you could assume that it's new. There were people, and there probably still are, that when they get things, they would like to kosher it before they use it. So they buy a pot and they'll boil it up and do something, wait 24 hours and boil it up. So if someone could do that, that's great, but it doesn't seem to be that's something that you have to really do. Usually, if it's sold as new, it's pretty much going to be new. Okay. So then the next thing was really the Seder, but I think we'll just call it a night, or should we do a few minutes? Let's just do very, very few minutes. Just talk about very small things. So first of all, like this, Kiddush. Okay, first of all, it's gonna be you just have to keep track of the order of how things are. Yakanaz is the famous thing, which is that because it's Mitzvah Shabbos, you have a specific order how you do it. Just some things to remember very quickly, that when it comes to the cup that you use for the wine, so there's all different shiurim. Some people would say that it's slightly above 3 ounces. That's because they say that it's supposed to be 86 grams, fluid grams, or I'm not sure exactly, or volume. Others would say that it's really 86 cc, which is officially very similar to grams, but I guess it's slightly off because they would say it's actually 2.9 ounces. 2.9 ounces is the accepted, I guess you could say, Chabad. This is what Reb Chaim Noah says. Even though the Tzemach Tzedek and Reb Nechemia Dubrovna, I think, which was the Alter Rebbe's brother. I'm sorry. So they both said that the Alter Rebbe changed later and went with a little bit of a bigger one. But Reb Chaim knows, years later, but he's stuck with 2.9. That seems to be the accepted amount, 2.9. So 2.9 ounces means that you buy a small becher. They're usually going to be a little bit bigger because we want to give a little bit room for error. So it's going to be 3.5, 3.2, something like that. And you'd rather get a small becher and finish the whole thing than to have a big becher and not finish it. It's much more of a sign of chedus, I believe it was. We spoke about it a few weeks ago. So you try to get even a smaller becher, which I actually just bought this year, a smaller one, because I realized as I'm getting older, it gets harder to run a whole seder and clean afterwards and make sure, Yom Tif, minyanim, whatever. So I actually ordered a little bit of a smaller one. Hopefully it'll come in time. That's about 3.5, I think it is. And this way you drink the whole thing in one as soon as, as quick as you can. It's supposed to be under 4 minutes if possible. So that's ideal if you can do that. Generally matzah, the shear is 1 kazayas. 1 kazayas is roughly a half a matzah. It's a very simple how to measure that. Kazayas is an ounce. So if you have 8 matzahs in a pound, that means every matzah is 2 ounces. So 1 ounce would be a half a matzah. That's usually the calculation. Depending on where you get it from, most places will give you more than 8 matzahs. They'll give you, let's say, 9 matzahs. So then you just have to keep track that your ounce is going to be a little bit more. So you have to have a little bit more, a little bit of a bigger piece. I think it was, I think the Costco ones were even smaller than that. I think there was like 7 or 8 matzahs per pound. So that would mean you could eat really like you could eat really like a third of a matzah, a little bit more than a third. For someone actually called me recently that they have a problem. It's called dry mouth or something, that basically they can choke if they eat something that's very like matzah like, and they were very concerned about the different parts of this. So you can really go with a little bit of a smaller shear if someone was in that situation. A smaller shear would be instead of 1 ounce, it would be, which is basically a half. Okay, so basically the shear work like this. You have an egg, and then you have a kazayas. So a half of an egg is a kazayas. That's the way we say. So a half of an egg is 1 ounce. That's the kazayas. However, there are those who say that a third of an egg is a kazayas. So that means that instead of 1 ounce, it's really about 0.67 of an ounce. So someone who has a very hard time eating this stuff, which would be a half a matzah, they can take really a little bit more than a third of a matzah, I guess you can say. And if they need to wash it with water or something like that, and this way they could be able to drink it, and you have at least up to 9 minutes or so. So if you stick to that shear, it should be pretty much more manageable, I would say. Okay, and that's basically just to end off with one thing, is that the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe that the night of the Seder is a very, very powerful night, and he told him to bet ruchnius, to make sure that you're asking for spiritual things. So we should experience true chedus, true freedom from everything, begashmis, beruchnius, and all Yidden as a klal should, and the whole world, that we should experience Mashiach, the real idea of Geula, this year before we even celebrate Pesach. Okay, anyone have a question? No? Baruch Hashem.